Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Nathan and today we are doing our 14th build for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, a build I'm simply entitling the Crossbow Rune Knight. This is a build that is all about using the Rune Knight Fighter subclass, which carves runes into its gear to empower itself, with a hand crossbow and one of my favorite races of all time, the Dragonborn, specifically the Gem Dragonborn out of Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. This build is also going to be a little bit of an homage to a past character of mine by the name of Kellok Draken, who passed away unfortunately. So wherever you are, Kel, salute to you. So our intro and agenda here. So I'm going to introduce and kind of talk about the concept of the build. I'll talk about level 1, levels 2 through 6, levels 7 through 9, levels 10 through 13, and levels 14 through 17 before summarizing. And at each of our kind of key thresholds, I'm going to give a damage report and talk about the tactics of this build and the kind of damage it can output. And those thresholds are level 6, level 9, level 13, and level 17. Let's get started and talk about kind of the concept of the build. So this build is a durable ranged damage dealer who's capable of outputting solid burst damage. I'm going to be comparing them against my other burst damage dealers, builds I call Nova builds. Although this build is going to have pretty darn solid damage per round abilities, just as it's going to be a fighter. This build also is going to have really solid options for doing area of effect damage, control effects, and protecting its allies. Just kind of as a natural part of what the Rune Knight subclass provides, as well as our race. This build can also be quite evasive when required, which is a big plus on an archer, because we have eventually we'll have the ability to fly from our race at least for a short time, and we can use this to evade melee enemies who can't fly. This build is also going to be a relatively simple single class build, although multi-classing is definitely an option, and I will kind of talk about that when we get to the summary. The books that you will need for this build, you'll need the Player's Handbook, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything for our subclass, and Fizban's Treasury of Dragons for our race. So, let's get started. At level 1, we are a fighter, and yes, as this is a single class build, we will be staying fighter the entire time. As a first level fighter, we get proficiency with all armor and shields, as well as simple and martial weapons. For our fighting style choice, we're going to take the archery fighting style, which gives us a +2 bonus to our attack rolls with ranged weapons. And this is probably one of the most impactful fighting styles you can possibly take, and is going to be really good. We also get Second Wind, which lets us use a bonus action once per short rest to recover a number of hit points equal to our fighter level plus a roll of a d10. And this will be a nice kind of heal to keep us topped up in and out of combat. We also get proficiency with strength saves and constitution saves as a fighter. For our race, I'm going to be taking the Gem Dragonborn out of Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, and you can pick any color that you want. This will just kind of determine the damage of your breath weapon, as well as the natural resistance that you get. So, as a Gem Dragonborn, we get Gem Ancestry, so we get to pick that color. There's a bunch of different options. We also get a breath weapon, and we can replace one of our attacks on our turn with the use of our breath weapon. We exhale a 15-foot cone of energy that does a 1d10 of the damage type associated with our ancestry. The enemy has to make a dex save, and the DC for that is based on our constitution modifier, and we can use our breath weapon a number of times per long rest equal to our proficiency bonus. We also get resistance to the damage type associated with our Gem Ancestry. We also get the Psionic Mind feature, which lets us communicate telepathically with other creatures within 30 feet of us, so long as they share a language. And this does not imbue the ability to talk back. We also have pretty standard stuff in other areas. We're medium sized. We have a 30-foot base speed, but importantly, this race does not have dark vision naturally. As for our starting stats, we are using the point buy method as always, and I'm going to be getting a 14 in dexterity with our racial +2 there, a 15 in constitution with our other racial +1 there. So those will both be 16. And then I'm going to get a 10 in intelligence, a 13 in wisdom, and a 12 in charisma with our remaining points. This will give us a starting hit points of 13, 10 plus our constitution modifier at first level. Now, in terms of our starting equipment, I'm going to take the items offered by our class here. So leather armor, a longbow and arrows, and probably a rapier and a shield for those situations where you are in melee. Eventually, you'll want to acquire a hand crossbow and some bolts, although you won't need to do this until level 4 or so. Now, I want to talk a little bit about our background here because it's kind of important. One of the things that Rune Knight has is some of their features will give them bonuses, specifically advantage on a bunch of different kinds of skills. So I want to kind of lean into that a little bit. So I would on this character, I would take the criminal background, which gives us deception and stealth, as well as proficiency with thieves' tools and gaming sets. And from our class, I would take athletics to kind of shore up that what would be a weak check, as well as perception. The important thing here is just make sure that you take a background that has a tool proficiency, and I think having thieves' tools would be really nice, especially if you didn't have a lockpicker in the party. And some of our class features will actually make us a really good lockpicker with the thieves' tools. Now, at level 2, we are a fighter 2, and we get action surge. So this is our main wonderful burst thing that we get for being a fighter. And once per short rest, we can give ourselves an extra action on our turn and get all the benefits thereof. So eventually, once we have extra attack, we'll be able to make our full quantity of attacks with our second action. And this is something that makes fighters naturally really good at burst damage. At level 3, we are going to be a fighter level 3, and we get our martial archetype, our subclass, and we are going to take the Rune Knight. The Rune Knight is all about inscribing runes into their gear and being empowered by them. So the Rune Knight, it gives us some bonus proficiencies. We gain proficiency with smith's tools, as well as we get to learn the giant language. We also get the rune carver feat. What this does is we know a couple of runes, we can carve them on our gear, and the ones I'm going to take here at this level are going to be the cloud rune and the fire rune. So all of the runes have a passive benefit and then an active benefit you can use once per short or long rest. So what the cloud rune does, as long as we are carrying our item that's inscribed with the cloud rune, we get advantage on sleight of hand and deception checks, and we can use our reaction to redirect an attack that was against any creature within 30 feet of us to another creature within 30 feet of us. So what you can do with this, let's say an enemy is attacking one of your friends and scores a critical, you can redirect that attack onto one of the enemy's allies instead. And importantly, you can't redirect a creature's attacks back on itself, but this is a really powerful way to protect yourself and the party. And the enemies don't even have to be in range of the original attack. You just magically get to redirect it. We're also going to take the fire rune here. What this does is it gives you basically expertise in all tools that you're proficient with, so you get to double your proficiency bonus. So this will make us really good with the smith's tools that we got from this class, as well as our thieves' tools and the gaming sets that we got from our background. The active on the fire rune is something I call fiery shackles. What this does is when you hit a creature with an attack, you can attempt to chain it with these fiery shackles. They take 2d6 fire damage, and then they have to make a strength save. This save DC is 8 plus your constitution modifier plus your proficiency bonus. And if they fail, they are restrained for 1 minute, and they can use their the end of each of their turns, they can attempt to break free of the restraints by repeating the saving throw. Importantly, while a creature is restrained, all attacks against them have advantage, so we're going to use this to get advantage on most of our attacks to increase our damage. The last thing that Rune Knights get is a feature called Giant's Might, which you can use a number of times per long rest equal to your proficiency bonus. So what this does is, as a bonus action, we empower ourselves with the power of giants, and we become large. And if there isn't enough space, we don't become large, but we still get all the benefits. So once per turn, on each of our turns, we can deal an extra 1d6 damage when we hit a creature with a weapon attack. We get advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, and like our carry weight increases and that kind of thing. And this is a really powerful thing. It's very good for grappling. We're not going to be using it for that. This is going to kind of be a backup damage rider for this character, and you don't necessarily need to use it very much, but it'll be nice to have, and it's a little bit of extra damage. At level 4, we are a fighter level 4, and we get our first ability score increase or feat, and we are going to take the Crossbow Expert feat. What this does is it lets us ignore the loading property on crossbows, so we don't have to use our bonus action to reload. It also makes it so that attacking at point blank range with a crossbow doesn't give us disadvantage on our attacks. And then if we make an attack with a one-handed weapon on our turn, we can make an attack as a bonus action with a hand crossbow that we are holding in one hand. Now, that attack with a one-handed weapon can just be your hand crossbow. So if you have your hand crossbow, you can blink and then make a bonus action attack with your hand crossbow. Importantly, although we ignore the loading property, we don't ignore the ammunition property. So your other hand does need to be free to reload your crossbow. So no shield, but that's perfectly fine. And this is the point once you get this where you'll want to swap to using a hand crossbow. At level 5, we are a fighter level 5, and we get extra attack. So now when we take the attack action on our turn, we can make 2 attacks instead of 1, which means that if we action surge, it'll be a total of 4 attacks on that turn. Our racial breath weapon improves from 1d10 to 2d10 damage, and we now get the gem flight feature. What this does is once per long rest as a bonus action, we can gain a flying speed equal to our speed for 1 minute and can hover. So if you need to get away, this is your natural evasive ability and can be quite powerful if the enemy can't get you back. At level 6, we are a fighter 6, and we get our next ability score increase or feat, and I'm going to take the sharpshooter feat. What this does is it lets us ignore up to half and 3/4 cover. We ignore the penalties for attacking at long range, so no disadvantage on attacks that are within the maximum range of our weapon, which is great because now we'll be able to fire our hand crossbow safely from further away. And then when we take the attack action, we can choose to take a -5 penalty to our attack roll to get a +10 bonus to our damage roll, and we have to declare this before we roll the dice. And this is just a massive thing for any ranged character and can significantly boost your damage output. All right, at level 6, it is time for our first damage report. So what are our tactics like at this point? So in the first round of combat, we're going to activate our Giant's Might and attack a couple times. In the second round of combat, we are going to attack and apply our Fire Rune on hit. And then we're going to attack again, action surge, attack 2 more times, and then make our bonus action hand crossbow attack. This is going to be a total of 5 attacks. So we're going to do 5 hand crossbow attacks with sharpshooter on. Now mathematically, we do more damage on average with sharpshooter on, even against a low armor class. But in a practical game, what I would probably do is I would probably leave sharpshooter off until I scored the initial hit and landed my Fire Rune restraint. And then once I had advantage, I would turn sharpshooter on and open up. But from a numbers standpoint, it makes sense to just always use sharpshooter. And when I'm doing the calculations, I'm going to assume that our target failed their saving throw against our Fire Rune and will thus be restrained. So all of our 4 follow-up attacks will have advantage. So each of our attacks is going to do 1d6 plus 13 piercing damage thanks to sharpshooter. We've got that extra 1d6 on one of our attacks with Giant's Might and the extra 2d6 from the Fire Rune. Importantly, if there are multiple enemies grouped up, you can replace one of your attacks, or potentially up to 3 of your attacks in this burst combo, with uses of your Dragon Breath. Enemies will take half damage even if they save. Those will do about 11 damage on average each. So if you have 2 targets, this will actually do more burst damage total, although less damage to a single target than just firing off your hand crossbow would. All right, so against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do 83.8 damage with our volley of 5 crossbow attacks. And against an enemy with an armor class of 15 and +5 to their saves, it would be 64.9 damage. And for this level, this is very good. We are pretty much keeping up with or beating a lot of my other burst builds to date. All right, at level 7, we get some improvements to our subclass, so we get to learn another rune. I'm going to learn the Stone Rune here. I'd like to have this one earlier, but for the sake of having advantage for our first damage report, I really wanted to have Fire Rune. What the Stone Rune does, while we have an item inscribed with the Stone Rune, We get advantage on insight checks, as well as dark vision out to a range of 120 feet. So we've now kind of fixed the problem that our character can't see in the dark. We also get a pretty cool reaction here. When a hostile creature ends their turn within 30 feet of us, we can force them to make a wisdom saving throw against our rune save DC, which is based on our constitution. If they fail, they are charmed by us for 1 minute. And while they are charmed in this way, they are incapacitated. And incapacitated is a nasty condition that's like advantage on attacks and all that stuff, and they can't do anything on their turn. And they get to repeat the saving throw at the end of each of their turns. But what this can potentially do is you just lock them down forever. And if you can lock them down, you and your allies can jump on them and crush them. I'm just verifying real quick. I'm pretty sure it ends at the end of their turn. Yep, they get to repeat the saving throw at the end of each of their turns. Okay, great. That's what I thought. And this is once per short or long rest that we can invoke that reaction. We also get another reaction feature here called Runic Shield. What this does is when another creature we can see within 60 feet of us is hit by an attack roll, we can use our reaction to force the attacker to reroll the d20 and use the new roll. And we can use this number of times per long rest equal to our proficiency bonus. So this is just another way that we can protect our allies, potentially deflecting attacks that hit them. If our use of our cloud rune is down, we can use this as another way to protect our allies or even ourselves. Except it's when another creature. So we can't use this to protect ourselves, but we can use it to protect our allies, and that is going to be a big deal. At level 8, we are a fighter 8, and this means ability score increase or feat number 3. And I'm going to take the Fey Touched feat here. This is a feat out of Tasha's. This is a half feat, so we get to do +1 to one of our mental ability scores. I'm going to pick Wisdom here, which is why I had it odd at the beginning. And we learn Misty Step and another spell of our choice that has to be from the enchantment or divination schools. I'm going to take Hex. Each of these spells we can cast once without spending a spell slot, once per long rest, and we can cast them with other spell slots that we normally have. We don't have any spell slots, so this is just once per long rest of each of these spells. So we've got Misty Step, which is a bonus action teleport, kind of as a get out of jail free or mobility utility type thing. And then what Hex does is as a bonus action, we can mark a creature, and then whenever we hit them with an attack roll, we deal an extra d6 of necrotic damage. And with the large volume of attacks that we're making, this is going to be a lot of damage and is more damage even than just bumping our dexterity, which what we will be doing in the future. So we're going to be using this primarily instead of Giant Smite against our main target. And if our target dies, we can use a bonus action while we're concentrating on Hex to transfer it to another creature. You could potentially turn on both, but Giant Smite is only like an extra d6 of damage and is not that impactful because Hex applies to every attack and we can only use Giant Smite once per turn. Additionally, when I'm planning my builds, I only allow myself a single setup round. So while you could have Giant Smite going as well, that would only give you like an extra 3.5 damage on average and is not as impactful as just using Hex. Also, because we're not strength-based, we don't really benefit a huge amount from the other features of Giant Smite. But I would plan on using Giant Smite if we'd already hexed on that particular day. At level 9, we are a Fighter 9, and we get Indomitable, which once per long rest, we can re-roll a saving throw, and we have to use the roll. This feature isn't very good, and as I talked about in my Fighter overview video earlier this week, it is getting improved in the 1D&D playtest. Specifically, I think you get to add your fighter level to the rerolled saving throw, which is actually really good. But for now, I don't really like this class feature. But at level 9, it is time for our next damage report. So what have we gained since last time? Well, for damage, we've really just gained the Hex spell, which is going to add a d6 of damage to all 5 of those attacks that we're making. We also have gained the Cloud Rune, which can potentially incapacitate enemies and has fixed our dark vision problems. We've gained Runic Shield to protect our allies. We boosted our Wisdom to 14, which will help with some saves as well as some of our skills. And we've gained Indomitable for that potential success on a saving throw that we otherwise failed. So here are our tactics now. Instead of using Giant's Might, we're going to hex our target and then do our same attack pattern. So anytime after the hex is up in the second round or beyond, we will pop off and do our burst. As an alternative, if you manage to land your Cloud Rune, as soon as it's your turn, just attack that target with everything that you have, because the Cloud Rune will give you burst damage on, well, it'll give you advantage on all of your attacks. I'm not assuming that our target got incapacitated by the Cloud Rune, but if they did, you'll do a little bit more damage on average than the numbers I'm reporting. And if you can land that, absolutely go for it, and you should have everyone dogpile that enemy and kill them, because they're very easy to kill at that point. So we're still making our 5 hand crossbow attacks, the first one without advantage because no fire rune, and then all the other ones with advantage. All of those attacks now deal an additional d6 of necrotic damage, and the save DC of our runes and our breath weapon has gone up. One of the cool things about this character is, since the DC of both our runes and our breath weapon is based on Constitution, we can actually scale our Constitution as a secondary stat to help all of those, which will help our control, our protection, as well as our area of effect damage. So against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do exactly 100 damage on average. And against an enemy with an armor class of 16 and +6 to their saves, it would be 74.8 damage. Now, at this point, we are falling behind a lot of my other burst builds. A lot of these builds at this point have extra attack online. They've got some other kind of smites or other things that are doing a lot of extra damage on their attacks. But one of the cool things about this character is that even though our burst damage isn't incredible, we have area of effect, we have control, we have 3 attacks per round at this point once we're set up with extra attack and crossbow expert. And we are very well rounded in terms of skills. One of the things I like about Rune Knights is they don't suck at skills like all the other fighter subclasses. And even though our burst damage isn't exceptional, it is still good. Now, since last time, we have only gained 16.2 points of damage against the low armor class, so an increase of about 19%, and just under 10 points against the higher armor class that I check against, so about 15% there. And these damage increases are just due to Hex, which on its own, that was a good boost, but we didn't really get anything else to combine with it in these intermediate levels. All right, at level 10, it is time for our next rune, and we are going to learn the Hill Rune. There are a couple of runes that you unlock after fighter level 7, the Hill Rune and the Storm Rune. I personally don't really like the Storm Rune. I think it's a kind of it seems good on paper, but one of the things about Rune Knight is you have a whole bunch of different reactions that you can take, and doesn't really do very well with your reaction economy. So I like the Hill Rune much better, and we're going to take that here. What this does is it gives us resistance to poison damage, as well as advantage on saving throws against poison, while we have it inscribed on our gear. And then as a bonus action, we can kind of gain some physical strength of a hill giant. And for 1 minute, we become resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. And we can invoke the active once per short or long rest. And the cool thing here is if there's a situation where you need some damage resistance, this will make you very tanky. This is akin to the damage resistance of a barbarian's rage, but we're going to be in medium armor, and we should be pretty happy here. We also get the giant stature feature here. We grow 3d4 inches in height, and the damage from our giant's might that we can do once per turn increases from 1d6 to 1d8, which is going to be nice, but we're not going to be planning on using giant's might for our burst. Although, when we don't have Hex, this is like a increase of about 1 point of damage on average. But at level 11, this is a huge level, we get extra attack rank 2. And what this does is, when we take the attack action, we can now make 3 attacks instead of 2. And this is a 50% increase to our damage output. The damage on our breath weapon also increases here from 2d10 to 3d10 of our racial type. And so this is going to be an average of about 16.5 damage. And if this lands, This is actually it's a little bit lower than the damage of one of our attacks. But if there's multiple enemies, you can blast both of them so long as you're close enough. Also, another neat thing here is we just passed 100 hit points at level 11, and that's due to when I'm calculating hit points, I always assume just the base natural that you get. I don't assume that you're rolling. So have been gaining 9 hit points every time we level up, and that's really solid. At level 12, we are a fighter 12, and we get our next ability score increase our feet. And I am now going to start pumping dex. So we're going to take +2 dex and increase it to 18. Mathematically, you're still best off using medium armor here, probably half plate. Although very soon, you'll probably just want to switch to using light armor, as it'll have the same armor class as the best medium armor. But it won't provide disadvantage on stealth checks. But of course, hopefully you'll have magic items, and I don't account for those when I do my builds, but you'll probably have a fair smattering of magic items by level 12. At level 13, we are a fighter 13, and just like at level 9, we get another use of Indomitable. Not very good, in my opinion, but it's better than nothing. But at level 13, it is time for our next damage report. A few things have changed, so let's talk about them. Mainly, we've gained extra attack, as well as bumped our dexterity to 18. We've also gotten our Hill Rune to make us tankier when we need to be. We have 2 uses of Indomitable, again, hopefully to make us tankier when we need to be. And we have our Great Stature Giant Smite for when our Hex has been used. All right, so our tactics haven't changed, although now we're making more attacks. So in the first round, we're going to hex our target and plink them 3 times. Then in the second round, we are going to attack, apply our Fire Rune, attack 2 more times, Action Surge, attack 3 more times, and then bonus action attack. And if we can land a Cloud Rune, we're just going to go all in and burst that target. No need to use the Fire Rune unless you want a little bit of extra damage on that particular turn. So we now have 7 hand crossbow attacks. Again, mathematically, it still makes sense from a damage perspective to have sharpshooter active all the time. Although, again, in a real game, I would probably turn off sharpshooter on my first attack just to make sure I could land the Fire Rune. The saves of our runes and our breath weapon are 16 at this point. And we do 1d6 plus 14 piercing damage plus 1d6 necrotic damage with each of our 7 hand crossbow attacks. So, against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do 152.4 damage. Against an enemy with an armor class of 17 and plus 7 to their saves, we would do 116.3. And since last time, we've gained 52.4 damage against the very low armor class and 41.5 against the higher armor class. And in both cases, these are increases of more than 50%, this is a really good increase. But that said, we are still way behind pretty much all of my other burst damage builds at this point. A lot of those builds were doing this kind of damage back at level 9. That said, we have really good control, we are resilient, we have area of effect, and we are a bit more flexible than a lot of those other burst builds that just go all in. One of the cool things about this character is pretty much all of our resources, except for Hex, come back on a short rest. So we should be able to do our stuff pretty much every combat, which is something that I find pretty enjoyable. All right, at level 14, we are a fighter 14, which means another ability score increase or feat, and we're going to take this chance to cap our dexterity. This is the second level where fighters get an extra feat, the other one being level 6, so we are now a couple feats ahead of everybody else in terms of 4 classes, other than rogues, but they're also a special case. At level 15, we get to learn another rune here. I'm going to skip the Cloud Rune, and I'm going to learn the Frost Rune. What this does is it gives us an advantage on animal handling and intimidation checks. And then as a bonus action, we can kind of increase our resilience. This gives us a +2 bonus to all ability checks and saving throws using strength or constitution for 10 minutes. We also get the Master of Runes feature. And this is the one that's really cool. We can now use each of our runes twice per short or long rest instead of once. So this means, potentially 2 uses of Fire Rune. You can even use it on the same turn for extra burst damage, which is what I'm going to be doing. although it's going to be a little bit of extra damage for the numbers, but you may not actually want to do that. But it also means that, we can redirect attacks more often, we can incapacitate more, and overall, this is just a wonderful thing and really helps with what our class is already doing. Really good feature. At level 16, we get our next ability score increase or feat, and I'm going to bump our Constitution to 18. This gives us a whole bunch of hit points, increases the save DC of both our runes and our breath weapon, and I think it just contributes to the resilience of this character, and the fact that it increases the save DC of both our racial breath weapon and our class features is something I really like, and one of the reasons why I wanted to play a dragonborn for this character. At our final level 17 here, we get now 3 uses of Indomitable. Yay. But the thing I'm most excited about here is we now get 2 uses of Action Surge per short or long rest. Now, I can't properly account for this in the burst damage with the way I do calculations. But one of the things this means is that every combat, we can now potentially have 2 burst rounds instead of 1. So while the numbers I'm going to report are going to have us using our Fire Rune twice in the 1 round, what you might actually want to do is if your target escapes your Fire Rune, you can just try again, or you can potentially do your burst damage a second time. And this is something that I think would be really fun to have, and just being able to action surge multiple times can make you a very effective character. And over the course of 2 rounds with this character, you can potentially put out 14 attacks, and that is pretty nasty. It'll get even higher at level 20 if you manage to get there. And our breath weapon also gets its final damage bump here to 4d10 damage, which is an average of 22, which at this point is actually more than our attacks if the enemy fails their save. I'm not going to be assuming that we're going to be using this for our burst round, but if you've got multiple enemies that you can hit with your breath weapon, you can replace your attacks with it, and you might as well. It's cool and fun and should be pretty powerful. All right, at level 17, it is time for our final damage report. So what has changed since last time? Well, we've capped our dex at 20. We've gained a Master of Runes for that extra use of our runes. We've got another use of Action Surge, although you won't see that in the numbers. And we've increased our Constitution to 18. We've also gained the Frost Rune for some extra resilience and have 3 uses of Indomitable. Tactics-wise, the only thing that's changed here is we're now going to apply a second Fire Rune on our burst round, just because it makes the numbers look a little better. But again, I would recommend potentially holding back on that to use on a future round with your second action surge. So again, we have our 7-hand crossbow attacks. We now do plus 15 damage with a little bit higher chance to hit. And the save DC of our runes and our breath weapon is now 18, which is pretty fun. All right, so against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do 170.9 damage. Against an enemy with an armor class of 18 and plus 8 to their saves, it would be 135.7. And since last time, again, that is an increase of 12 to 17%, depending on the enemy armor class, which is not the most significant. And this really just comes because we've gotten that extra 7 damage on average from the second Fire Rune, and we've bumped our dexterity up a little bit. These numbers are kind of pale in comparison to a lot of other burst builds I've done. A lot of those would be breaking 200 at this point, even against the higher enemy armor class. And some builds I've made will, be doing this kind of damage back at level 13 or even level 9. But again, this damage is pretty sustainable. We can do it potentially twice per combat. And each round we are making 4 attacks at this point, which again, overall, very solid. And if you couple that with our area of effect and control options, I feel like we have a very well-rounded and very effective character, even if their burst numbers at the end aren't going to be the greatest. All right, so it's time to summarize. What is the overall score of this character? So to get this, I take all the numbers at all of our damage reports, and I average them into one number. So this number for this build is a 112.4. And this is not the worst I've ever done. This is actually a few points on average better than my compound bow build, which was our fighter artificer build using arcane archer that attacked with its intelligence. Now, interestingly, that build is actually does more damage than this build at the higher levels, although it's not as good at the low levels as this build is. So I'm happy with where this was, especially given that we are a pure class character. But there are, a lot of options you could do if you wanted to multi-class to improve this character's damage. So if I was going to take this version of the build to 20, I would go to Fighter 20. We are so close. There's one more Rune Knight feature that we get at level 18, and then another feat which we could use to cap our Constitution. And then we have extra attack rank 3 for 4 attacks per action, which would be really, really fun. Now, I want to talk about multi-class versions of this build because I think multi-classing could potentially improve this character quite a bit. Although, again, I really like being able to reach things like Master of Runes and 2 uses of Action Surge for rest by level 17. If you multi-class this build, you are going to lose those as well as potentially extra attack rank 4. But if I was going to multi-class this build, I think my top choice would be 3 levels of Gloomstalker Ranger. Now, we have I started with 13 wisdom, so you wouldn't really need to change the stats. I would probably take your Gloomstalker levels, levels 7 through 9. And the cool thing that this gives us, well, first, it gives us Hunter's Mark at Ranger level 2. So now we don't need to take the Fey Touched feat because we have our damage rider naturally from multi-classing. It also gives us another fighting style. I might honestly take Druidic Warrior just to get some Druid cantrips like guidance and that kind of thing. If you wanted to take, say, defense for more armor class, that's perfectly fine. But once we're at Gloomstalker 3, the big things that we get here, it extends our dark vision. So that'll make our dark vision even better. It gives us an extra attack in the first round that does an extra d8 of damage, boosts our speed in the first round a little bit, lets us add our wisdom modifier to initiative. If you were doing this, I might, drop my intelligence to 8 to make my wisdom 14 naturally. It also makes us invisible while we're in darkness to creatures that rely on dark vision. So we've got that situational invisibility for potential advantage. And one of the cool things about their Dread Ambusher feature, the feature that gives them that extra attack in the first round, is it applies to each time that you take the attack action. So if you do that and you action surge in the first round, you can potentially, you could to Dread Ambusher twice. So 2 extra attacks, each of them with an extra d8. So one of the cool things about taking this dip is that if we do it, even though we're not going to make it to Fighter 11 before level 13, we'll still be able to make that big volley of attacks due to the way Action Surge works with Dread Ambusher. Now, if I was going to take these 3 levels of Gloomstalker, I would probably take Fighter to, say, level 12. And then you have a couple more levels. You could take another level or 2 of Ranger to get second level spells and a feat. I think I would probably take 2 levels of Rogue to get Cunning Action, to get Disengage and that kind of thing, just to help me be a little more slippery. This version of the build, I think, would score a lot better in terms of its damage numbers because it would be doing 6 attacks in the burst round at level 9 instead of having that later. And you could do a Bugbear for this version of the build, and they would do a lot of damage. That's a pretty classic thing to combine Fighter Action Surge, Dread Ambusher, and Bugbear to get 2d6 extra damage on all of your attacks. Again, very powerful character, but I really liked the way that the Rune Knight just works as a pure class. Another option that you could do here, if you want to keep 12 levels of fighter, is to have, say, 5 levels of a full caster. This would give you a lot of flexibility and a lot of utility, and I would put my high mental stat in whatever thing was going to be associated. So if I wanted to do like a warlock or a sorcerer, I would put it in charisma. If I wanted to do wizard, intelligence, and that kind of thing. Mainly, you're looking for some kind of damage rider. Honestly, I might consider warlock here. You could get Spirit Shroud, which would add a d8 to all of your attacks, although require you to be in 10 feet. Cleric could also work pretty well. They've got a lot of cool stuff. This would just kind of make you a little bit more flexible, although again, by not going past level 12 in fighter, you lose Master of Runes and you lose the double action surge. Other races that you could use for this build. You could absolutely use variant human. This will let you start with crossbow expert and is a super solid option. Custom lineage also allows you to do this and is really good. Um, Using any elf for elven accuracy, which will give you that triple advantage, so 3d20s per attack roll. While your enemy is restrained by your shackles is also very good. You would need to take the elven accuracy feat, but that's okay. And then if you want to do the Gloomstalker thing, Bugbear out of Monsters of the Multiverse is pretty nutty. But yeah, I love the Dragonborn because we've got that AoE attack breath weapon as well as the flight and the pure Rune Knight. I just love their ability to redirect or potentially force attack rerolls to protect your allies, and you can control your enemies with things like the Cloud Rune and your Fiery Shackles. And having that double action surge for double burst turns by the time you get to level 17. So cool. And finally, I just want to emphasize again, this character is way better at skills than a regular fighter because they've got advantage on a whole bunch of different things just because of how the runes work. So that has been my Crossbow Rune Knight character. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Have you played a Rune Knight? Have you played a one that fights at range? Please let me know about it in the comments. And yeah, if you have any thoughts about this build or any ideas for ones you'd like to see in the future, again, please let me know. Thanks for watching. My name is Nathan, and I will see you next time.